Uh, well, thank you everyone for continuing this wonderful gathering. I appreciate you all for being here. I just wanted to, one sec, okay. Welcome everyone. So with us today is Ms. Dorinda Makanaonalani Nicholson. Her story today is about the tale of two wars from Pearl Harbor to Hiroshima through a child's eyes. Miss Nicholson is an award-winning author, storyteller, hula dancer, speaker. Dorinda debuted in hula at age 3, dancing with her mother in Waikiki. When she was 6 years old, she and her father watched Japanese torpedo bombers fly low over their house. She could see the pilot's goggles. Her first book, Pearl Harbor Child, tells the story of the bombing of Pearl Harbor through the eyes of a child. An award-winning author, she believes it is her mission to write World War II stories for both students and the adults to bring history to life. She would love to receive your selfies taken in front of the large photo of her and her brother wearing their child-sized gas mask when you visit Pearl Harbor Visitor Center. Her primary audience is the classroom. Her audience has also included the U.S. Embassy in Prague and lectures in Guam, Saipan, Jakarta, and at Pearl Harbor events. Her story has been featured as Nanea, a World War II Hawaiian American Girl doll, in People Magazine, NBC News, the History and Military channels, and on CBS Sunday Morning News with Lee Cowan. Cowan filmed on location at Pearl Harbor. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Nicholson. Dorinda, thank you so much.
Aloha. Oh, I love that. I'm getting aloha all the way across the ocean to Japan. I, ever since I was a little girl, every December 7th, I would think about Pearl Harbor and the events and didn't think about talking or writing my story until it was 50 years later. And then I realized this was a story that I certainly wanted to tell to our American children and then children around the world. So Hiroshima, also now lately, I have been interviewing several of your Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors, and I just feel a kinship between a girl in Hawaii and children in Japan. And so I will be starting and showing you what it was like in Hawaii in 1941 and through the war years, and then my journey in receiving stories and sharing it with students in school, and then extending that to all of you in Japan. Welcome to 1941.
Sparked the defiant battle cry, "Remember Pearl Harbor." And even 75 years later, the dwindling ranks of those who watched the attack happen remember it still. Our cover story is reported by Lee Cowan.
Hawaii's Pearl Harbor. It was just a place before it became a memorial, a tropically tranquil place that was Dorinda Nicholson's childhood home.
This was my favorite part of the neighborhood.
Dorinda was just 6 years old that Sunday in 1941. Born in Hawaii, her family was civilian and lived near the dock for the famous Pan Am Clippers. The idea of war coming to this remote Pacific outpost seemed to most here about as likely as a white Hawaiian Christmas. But at 7:55 a.m. on December 7th, a storm did indeed come.
They were coming right over the house.
And when you came outside and you looked up, they were right there.
right overhead, canopies pushed back, and could see the pilots' faces. They were that close.
What did you think when you saw that?
Oh, I just leaned closer to my dad and hugged him a little closer.
Dorinda Nicholson now lives in Kansas City, Missouri, but has made the nearly 5,000-mile trip here to Pearl Harbor for almost every anniversary to tell her story. Sometimes bringing with her the tiny gas mask that she and her brother wore as children in the days after the attack. So why did you keep this all those years?
Oh, it's my history.
It was history that changed her life and ours. The cry, "Remember Pearl Harbor," sounds pretty obvious. But the challenge for the next generation is to really remember.
So when I started being asked to talk about the memories, I wrote them down in Remember Pearl Harbor, the first attack. And then I was invited to schools. And the question that I got most often was, is your dog okay? And there she is. Her name was Hula Girl. And there is a story about not being able to find her, but eventually I did, and a lifelong friend and buddy. Hawaii is the most isolated landmass in our world. Thousands of miles. Look how far it is from Japan. Look how far it is from California, with no visible place to land. So when you look at this and you think back to 1941, how in the world could anyone, and we had been looking at Japan, come to these islands of Hawaii? Here is the group of our 8 major islands. Oahu is the main island where Honolulu, our capital, is located. And we're now a territory of the United States. And look at Pearl Harbor. Look how huge it is with a narrow opening. So, and in the middle is Ford Island. So you could do a landing trip, a strip, and then you could have your planes, you could have, they use the Ford Island for takeoff and landing. You could have ships there, battleships. And in the harbor, this is what it looked like the morning of December 7th. So Ford Island there in the middle, and many of you have been able to visit the Arizona Memorial, which is there along Battleship Row. On the other side of Ford Island, you see the USS Utah. It was the first to take the bombs that morning because where the Utah was moored was where our battleship, the USS Enterprise, was moored and expected to be docked that morning. Luckily for us, because we didn't believe Pearl Harbor could happen, we're too far away. Airplanes at that time certainly could not come that far, that it was not going to happen, but it would happen in Guam and certainly in the Philippines and Wake Islands. So we had sent the Enterprise to deliver supplies there, and they hadn't quite gotten back. Across from the Utah, you see Pearl City Peninsula, and you see a house. That was our house. And then down here in the corner, there's my baby brother. His gas mask is almost as big as he is. and myself and my dad. My dad was from Missouri, and little did I know I would end up here, but that was the reason I came to Missouri. So you can see how close we are to all of these ships in the harbor. Today, the Arizona is there, the Missouri is there. That was brought to the islands later. And then across from Pearl City and on the other side of Ford Island, the Utah is there, but it doesn't have the visitors or have a memorial to it like the Arizona does. I hope that if you find someone with a military pass, that they can take you to see the Utah. It lays there, it's over on its side, and there is a flag, half-mast over the top of the Utah. So there's my Missouri dad. Myself, I'm 6 years old, my baby brother, and my mom, who is Hawaiian and from Hawaii. And she worked for Pan American World Airways. So that was why we were living at the end of that peninsula. Because if you were to fly to Hawaii at that time, you landed on these sea clippers and used the water as your landing place. The water had to be calm, so you couldn't land out into the ocean. And you pulled up to a dock and you came onto a wood dock from your airplane, which took you about 18 hours from California to land on dry land. So here is a tourist. Look at all the leis he has. He must have had a lot of friends to greet him when he arrived in Hawaii. So when you would come in, you would fly by the famous Waikiki beach, which at that time only had 2 hotels. And that would then be your first view. And then you would land actually on the waters of Pearl Harbor. 1941, December the 7th. Along about November, what would be our Thanksgiving time in 1941, a large armada of 6 aircraft carriers have left northern Japan on their route to the Hawaiian Islands. If you could not fly a plane, certainly we have propeller planes at that time, that many miles, then you bring your airplanes, about 300 of them, on the backs of aircraft carriers to your target. This is the deck of the Akagi, the lead ship. And if those look like rolled up mattresses around the tower, they are, to protect the center and the integrity of the aircraft carrier. I got to meet Lieutenant Zenji Abe, a Japanese pilot on the deck and within the aircraft carrier, the Akagi. It was years and years later that I was able to meet Mr. Abe, to be a visitor in his home, to ask him what it was like to be a pilot that morning. And he talked about how he trained at their Naval Academy to be this pilot, and how he was very, very proud to serve his country. And this war that changed the life of millions of people around the world and certainly the friendship between Japan and the United States would not happen until many years later. But let me tell you about Lieutenant Abe and the American Marine that he will meet that morning when their lives cross at Pearl Harbor. It was about 3 a.m. and Zenche got dressed, went into his room, and said his prayers. He bowed by the shrine, and into his pocket, he put the picture of his baby daughter. And then out the room, down the narrow corridor, climbing up a ladder, coming onto the top deck. And here he is taking off, and it's still very, very early in the morning. He looks back, and the crew is on the Akagi, and they're waving, bonsai, bonsai, good luck to him. He flies in close formation. Notice how the canopies are open because you cannot use your radio. You don't want the US to be listening. And so you are flying by visual commands close together, and you're about 30 minutes out from the islands when the first bombs start at about 7:50 or 7:55. These were the planes that my dad and I saw. We were having breakfast Sunday morning, and the reason for a December choice by Japan was the oceans are very rough. So they felt the 6 aircraft carriers would not have other ships in the area or even planes overhead, chosen on a Sunday because on a Sunday, you would expect the men on the ship to still be asleep and no troops ready. And in fact, the whole island asleep. And that is exactly what happened. So mom, dad, baby brother, we're having breakfast, and we start to hear low flying airplanes. Mom says, how strange, Sunday mornings. And you saw where we lived. You saw where our house was. We were used to the Army and Navy practicing with each other, but not on a Sunday morning. The planes came in, and this is Battleship Row. Look how close together our ships were. We were anticipating war with Japan, so this was an easier way to guard between the ships. And this is the West Virginia. I'm going to be telling you about the West Virginia in a close-up coming soon, but I want you to notice those are called rooster tails, the track of 2 torpedoes that are about to hit the West Virginia. The other circles then are bombs from high-flying planes that would have missed the West Virginia. Jose, if you're able to enable the sound, that would be helpful. The West Virginia, you're seeing her here. She's on fire. She has taken 6 torpedoes. She is sinking. And then up here in the bridge, you see 2 men. One of those men is a 19-year-old Marine. His job on the battleship West Virginia, which are all named for states, the West Virginia, his job was to be the bugler. And so at 10 minutes of 8 in the morning, he is standing up here, bugle in hand, and trying to blow the bugle for reveille, you know, to tell the men below deck, it's time to come up. And when you get up on deck, it's time to salute the flag, and we're going to raise the flag. This is what we do every Sunday morning. But out of the corner of his eye, he sees this low flying airplane. And then out of the belly of this torpedo bomber comes a torpedo headed for the ship. And he says to himself, I will have that American pilot court-martialed. I'm going to get the number off the tail of his plane. How dare he come in that low this morning? And then that torpedo reaches his ship. And he cannot believe what is happening. Just like my family, this is Sunday morning. Wow, those practices sound real. The men in the harbor, same thing. They even are seeing the planes until they see a large red circle on the side of the plane. So you are seeing now the rescue boats trying to go and help the West Virginia, trying to put out the fires. The captain, Captain Benyon, says to the men, men, abandon ship. Richard then has to jump from where you saw him in the bridge and into the water to escape. And then when he is in the water, he has to avoid the oil that is burning and swim past his sinking ship right here and then over to the small piece of land that I showed you in the map that is Ford Island. From that night on, Richard suffers with nightmares, with PTSD. He does not mind going to fight at Iwo Jima. And then he signs up for Korea. And then he goes to Vietnam. And he still has the nightmares. And the rest of the explosions that are going on in the harbor. The planes leave. There are waiting aircraft carriers to take them back to Japan. We didn't find them coming. We did have some alerts. Radar was just starting. And there was an Army private at one of our bases, saw them on the screen. So he calls headquarters and he says, large number airplanes, unidentified, heading toward Hawaii. The other sergeant answering says, oh, don't pay attention to them. There are airplanes coming from California, B-17s that are supposed to help us. Actually, the B-17s were starting to land as the attack was ending. And this is one of the B-17s that was shot during the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and we had bombings at Bellows Air Force Base, and we had bombings over in Kaneohe, another base. And actually, the B-2 base that we have here in the Missouri area, just 30 minutes to where I live, are where the B-2 bombers are placed. It is named Whiteman, and when I go on Red Cross assignments and work with veterans and work with telling this story, I always ask the kids, the military kids, do you know who George Whiteman is or was? And none of them knew. So even those of you in Missouri who might not know, he was the first pilot to be shot down and killed on December the 7th, not at Pearl Harbor, but at this base called Bellows Field. I always ask my students, do you know what friendly fire is? And I usually get the answer. It's when you shoot your own people, you shoot your friends. You don't mean to, it's an accident, and it always happens. We were not prepared. So often I have looked at the events of 9/11, couldn't happen, and about the same number, 3,000 killed. And Pearl Harbor didn't happen, but it did. And friendly fire always happens. So these were a group of men who worked on repairing ships in the ship harbor. They were civilians. They heard on the radio that Pearl Harbor was under attack. They could see in the distance the black oily smoke. They're heading towards their job. They know they're going to be needed. Think of the harbor. We are not prepared. We have to get our guns in place. And then we get our guns in place. And then when we shoot,
Margaret
we
Marion.
miss an airplane.
Join the meeting.
This is where the shells come down in the city. So 5 men, you can see, doesn't that almost look like machine gun bullets? But those are, when a bomb explodes, those are the shrapnel pieces. So the civilians who died on December the 7th, I am so sad to tell you that almost every one of them, friendly fire, a sad, sad part of war. The youngest, 2 years old, this is near this is José, this is just down the street from the University of Hawaii, where this took place. She never even woke up out of her crib. And you know how far Pearl Harbor is from the University of Hawaii, but these, again, are own shells coming down on civilians. And other friendly fire. There were about 80 civilians that were killed that morning. And the civilians, there were 5 who were Honolulu firemen, and in helping to put out and working in the Pearl Harbor area, they were civilian victims. My dad and I are standing out in the front yard, oily black smoke, miles and miles high, and the smell of smoke and the smell of oil. And my dad grabs me. We go into the house. He tells Mom to get our my baby brother, and puts us in the back of our car. Above our house are sugarcane fields above Pearl Harbor. And into the car, Dad drives us into the sugarcane fields. And that's where we wait. That's where we have no idea what's going on. Jose, would you go back one slide? And so here we are in the car. We've gotten out. Pretty much all of the our neighbors are coming up here to hide. We can look down and we can see the harbor. We can see the ships burning, and then another explosion. And so when I was watching 9/11 at work, the Tuesday after it happened, we always had a team meeting. And so we had the TV on and watched the second tower and second airplane go down. And there was something inside of me that I couldn't figure out what I was feeling. It was kind of a body memory. And then I realized later the burning of the Twin Towers and looking at the battleships burning, the oil was the same. And the Arizona burned and burned and burned and burned. Twin Towers burned and burned, and oily, oily black smoke. So while we're here in the harbor, I could see Mom and Dad and all the families, and they're huddling close, talking and talking. Dad's twisting the radio dial, trying to get any kind of news. And what we get is the radio announcer says, "This is the real McCoy. Take cover. Do not leave your house. Do not use your phone. Military, get to your base. Medical, get to the nearest hospital to treat the wounded, injured. Do not leave your house." And then nothing else. Nothing like, "There's so many dying here and you can go to a shelter." Nothing like that. And then about 2 hours later, again, all the moms and dads are around the radio dial, and our governor comes on. And our governor said he's had communication with President Roosevelt. We are now being placed under martial law. The military will be in charge. Tonight, curfews start. You may not leave your house from the time the sun goes down until the sun goes up, and then goes off the air. The sun is about to go down. Remember Hula Girl? I left her. I left breakfast on the table. I hope she got it. So I run up to the military police that are now starting to come into the sugarcane fields where all of us that live in the harbor are hiding. And I ask, "Can I go get my dog?" And he said, "No. All of you are going to the sugar mill at Waipahu, just about 10 miles up the road, and they will take care of you." And so the people of Waipahu acted like the Red Cross, which was so involved during Hawaii's World War II time. And they gave us pillows and blankets and they fed us. This is the first time that I'm scared. I'm often asked, "Oh, weren't you scared?" I was scared during this time. We are all sitting there in the dark, and the rumors start to fly. Our next door neighbor starts to say, "Well, I bet when sunlight comes up in the morning, we're going to be surrounded and we're going to have guns." And my mom gave him what we call in Hawaii that stink eye look. Stop scaring the children. But I could tell by the way she was hugging us, she was scared too, because of what happens next. In the distance, we see what looks like Pearl Harbor is lighting up again. We don't know what it is. Takes me 50 years to find out. When I am speaking at Pearl Harbor and the person speaking next to me survived friendly fire. Remember I said our aircraft carrier wasn't in port, but they came in to try to help us. We shot them down in the night. Only one survived. Sad part of war. So the money starts being issued, American currency with Hawaii on one side. This is the head of a bullet that came through our roof, and our roof caught on fire. And then this bullet stopped by the wall telephone in the kitchen. I still have that bullet today, by the way. And then this is the other side of the American money. All the paper money we had to take to the banks, and then the banks would stamp them this way and give them back to you, so that all money in Hawaii was used as invasion money, so that this could not be used by anyone outside of the Hawaiian Islands. We were, everything was going to change. There's not going to be any trash pickup. And I was even kind of laughing to myself today about, I was putting some garbage down my disposal, and knowing I was going to get ready for tonight, remembered that back 4 years ago, your mom and dad got a bucket and you put whatever was left over in there. And if you had pigs to feed, which my uncles did, but we didn't, we lived in a neighborhood. So you put all that in a bucket and then you hang it on a nail outside your garage. And then the garbage, that's the garbage man, different from the trash, would come. There's not going to be any of that anymore. And we're worried about the water, what's going to happen to our water, what are the diseases going to be. So you can see here, all of us are at school and we're all getting shots to be worried about that, any kind of diseases. I want you to look closely at our dad's car. The reason for the photo was my dad living in Missouri. You couldn't use the telephone. You can't even hardly use mail. And this is now enemy waters. And then the mail was censored. So he took a picture to show that I had a new hula skirt. And I had never thought about this becoming historical, because look at the headlights. You can see the Hawaii, the year there, and our license plates. The top part is painted black. And then you see the shield. To me, they look like cat's eyes. And then under the shield, you could leave a little bit of light, but then you took gray enamel and painted the bottom half. If you could even be out at night, you had to be like a doctor or someone that had an important, essential job. My dad worked the post office, so he could be out at night with the right kind of identification. The speed limit was 15 miles an hour. This is what Waikiki Beach looked like. We used to hang our swimsuits there on the barbed wire. Another look at Waikiki Beach, all the signs of wartime. And there would be barbed wire around the whole island. And of course, if everything's dark at night, you absolutely knew you were living in wartime conditions. And these are the gas masks. If you go to visit at the Arizona Memorial, there's a life-size picture of this photo, my brother and I. So I always tell anyone, if you go, you have to send me a selfie here. So those of you who are listening, especially you students in Japan, there is going to be an exhibit starting on the USS Missouri in June about the beginning of World War II. And then starting a year later, the exhibit will switch to the end of World War II. That especially needs to involve Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Japan. This is what we would have air raid drills for. And you know, even now when the tornado sirens go off, I start to have a body memory of the sirens that we would hear during school. So you would reach under your desk, you'd open up your gas mask case, and then you get out to the hallway as soon as you can and put that mask on. Every person 2 years old and up had to have a gas mask. This is the bomb shelters that were built at school. This was at McKinley School, for those of you who know Hawaii. There's the teacher with his gas mask on his hip. The elementary school that I went to had a covered up bomb shelter, and we used to beg our teachers, don't make us go in, because it rains almost every night in the school that I went to. And so the water would come in and go down the steps and into the mud on the floor, and there'd be roaches and centipedes, and we were scared. Bomb shelters, this is what it looked for the workers who worked downtown. And then some did bomb shelters in their own backyard. I told you about the censoring. See the date, and then look down here at the bottom. This was my dad's job. And Dad said that he would open up the mail and read if there was anything that sounded like you were a spy or a traitor. And he would take a large black marker and mark through it, or he would just cut it up like confetti. Very worried about any dangerous secrets getting out. Also, the school that I went to was next door for elementary school, was the governor's palace and home. And these, I know those are our American soldiers with these sandbags. It scared me so badly that when I would walk to school, I would cross the street so I wouldn't have to walk by them. All the signs of wartime and rationing. You know, even today, Hawaii has rationing, because everything that comes to, remember those isolated islands, has to come on big shipper tanks filled with our goods. We know now those ships are going to be bringing soldiers and sailors, and they're not going to be bringing your pencils or your bubble gum or anything like that. So they're waiting here for the doors to open. And then it was lucky if you knew the people that owned the store, who might give you one more can than you deserved. It was such a scary time. The military were told, send your women and children away. No, away. So look at all the people trying to get passage on boats to leave the islands. And then if you weren't military, you were highly encouraged to leave. So many of my friends left, so that what you had left in Hawaii were soldiers, sailors. And here I am going to school about a block from here. Dad would not even let me come down the street to catch the bus to go home from school. And here I am, a little girl, and I can tell Army, Navy, Coast Guard. Oh, you're a Marine. And then on the other side of this street were nothing but beer taverns. And laying in the street would be these 18, 19-year-old boys having had too much alcohol or liquor. José mentioned to you that today is the anniversary of the executive order to all instructions of Japanese ancestry and what happened to the Japanese Americans. Not as many as in Hawaii, because at the time of the bombing, Hawaii was 1/3 Japanese. And so a lot of them helped in the war, and we had a camp on Oahu and on the outer islands, but not to the extent as in Oregon, Utah, Arizona, California, of course, and even in Arkansas. And here they are. Look how nicely they are dressed, but even with their gas masks. This was the camp on Oahu, very small compared. And we also had another camp in the middle of the island that right now is being restored by the Japanese Cultural Association in the islands. And I am so proud of this picture. Every one of these young men is Japanese, Hawaiian American. They are standing on the steps of our palace in downtown Honolulu, volunteering to serve. And serve they did with honor. The role of women, look at all the women. And they're wearing hose and heels and carrying a purse of the time. In the background, see the camouflage on the Aloha Tower? It was our tallest building in Hawaii for many years. But American women are now serving, they're building airplanes. We had the best equipped military. Here are the Rosie the Riveters. My mother was a hula teacher, and these are her students, and I'm the littlest student. And we entertained, and so at ages 7 to 11, I felt so pleased to be a showgirl. Collected money. I went without my milk so that I could buy stamps to put in a war bond. And so that as a kid, I could loan money to the government. I could recycle tires. I could take my mom's pots and pans to school. And this is going to be the winning bullet. Victory Gardens, those here in Missouri and the continent, we all had Victory Gardens. And the signs that were in the window. I loved after 9/11, all the flags that you saw, all these stars in the window, all the patriotism that we felt. And you didn't want this star to become a gold star, which meant the ultimate sacrifice. President Truman announces the war is over. This is the way it looked downtown in Honolulu. We were so happy. The war is finally over. The troops are coming home. These are the Japanese Americans. Look at baby brother. Long war, 60 million killed. So here on the deck of the USS Missouri is where the treaty was signed to end the war. Today, the USS Missouri is in Pearl Harbor, right behind the Arizona Memorial. So you've got like bookends where the war started, where the war ended. I hope that sometime during this upcoming 80th anniversary that you will go and stand on that bronze huge seal that sits on the floor here under where the treaty was signed and feel that love of peace. You know, when I talk to kids and I talk about mental health and I talk about wars and how all of this is the love of power, and how do we turn that into the power of love? So these talks between Japan and our country will be talks of love. The treaty, how didn't we have gotten a piece of paper and signed it earlier? But here is the document that ended the war. On the number 63, the battleship Missouri, here she is on the deck. You can look over to the Arizona, and your boat will take you right up to see where the boat is docked. You go through the portal there. You stand by where the flag is. You look over, and the oil still comes up. My mother says it's the tears of the men that are still below you. I have been fortunate enough to be on a ceremony where a survivor later has asked for his ashes to be taken down to join with his shipmate. And the numbers of the men who are there below you, many are family members, and the flag that flies so proudly over her. So remember Pearl Harbor so that we can remember to use the power of love. And I like to say, remember December 7th and remember September 11th to honor those so that they did not die in vain. So I told you about Richard, the Marine, up there on the bridge, diving into the water, the nightmares. I told you about Zenji Abe flying in that morning. Mr. Fisk, when I interviewed him, told me about the nightmares and that how he had to find peace. And so he decided to do that by inviting Japanese pilots to come and visit Pearl Harbor. Wasn't easy, but Mr. Abe came, they became friends. And I want to end this with the story of these two men as an example. And I even got to visit with Mr. Abe, my husband and I, as a guest in his home. And as a guest in his home, I said, Mr. Abe, would you send a message of friendship to the children in my country and the children in your country? And you will get to see him do that. And then he said, Richard, son, if I give you some money, would you buy 2 red roses and take them out to the memorial? One is for you, one is for Japan. It's for all those who died. I am so sorry. And Richard said, I'm sorry too. We were both young boys who loved our country. And so Richard, while he was still alive for the last 12 years, on the deck of the Arizona in front of that memorial wall, blue taps to honor this friendship. Come and see their story.
Yeah.
Children can learn from the mistakes of the past and maybe teach their country how to spread peace all over the world. There are many countries in a small mother Earth. We need to recognize each does have its own history, culture, and customs. It is most important we work together to understand each other. Your friends, Zenji Abe.
Our friend Richard Fisk, the bugler from the USS West Virginia, has his own special way of remembering those who died on December the 7th. Once a month, he goes to the USS Arizona Memorial and has a very simple but eloquent way of remembering. Let me ask him to tell you about it.
To help me with this ceremony today. We fought a vicious war. We both suffered a lot. And yet, we can put all of that aside and become very sincere friends. And I think this is the way it's supposed to be.
I wanted so much to share this story with all of you, and thank you for letting me do that as a Pearl Harbor child. Aloha.
Thank you, Dorinda. That was really beautiful. We've had some wonderful comments in the chat from our audience on the Zoom. I don't know if anybody has any questions specifically. If there are questions, please feel free to put in the chat, or you can, unmute yourself and ask them for Dorinda. We did have a lot of wonderful people though share stories about their own personal connection to the tragedies of December 7th and World War II. Any questions,
I'll
folks?
see.
Hey,
Yeah.
this is Gloria. Hi, Jose. Ms. Nicholson, thank you so much. My name is Gloria. I'm the interim president of the American Society of Hiroshima and Nagasaki Atomic Bomb Survivors here in the Southern California. Thank you so much for your presentation. Jose has been talking to me about you for a long time. And I look forward to talking to you and share experiences. And I'm so touched by your presentation today. Thank you so much. This is a gift of a lifetime. Thank you, Jose.
You're so welcome. And if there's a way to share more of this with students, gosh, what a hard time they are having now in our world. And if they can learn from anything, or maybe they can teach us about peace if we can have that dialogue.
I know. Thank you. I will definitely reach out and I'll get the information from Jose. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gloria. Very much appreciate you